Hello.
Hey, KP.
Hi there. How are you, Art?
Doing well.
Looks like we have some company, huh?
Yep.
Everybody.
People are coming in.
Nice.
I think I just gave you host permissions, KP. I have
Okay.
everyone muted just to cut down on background noise, but certainly we can change that obviously when we get to the Q&A, but that's sort of the default setting right now.
Sure. Sounds good. Let me make sure that I have my presentation pulled up, and I'll start to share my screen to see if it's all good. Okay. Let's try this. All right. Art, can you see this?
Yes.
Awesome. Cool.
If anyone has any questions, put them in the chat for now. And, also if you have any, audio or video issues, just let us know.
So it looks like we had what I think close to 40 people sign up on Luma. You're mute, I think, Art. Still on mute. Great to meet you, everybody. I see a couple names here that I know from Twitter. Thanks for joining from wherever you're joining. I actually had an interesting mention on Twitter that there's, I can't recall who the name was, but but apparently the person was gonna set up an alarm for 4 a.m. and he's in Australia to come wake up and attend this workshop. I was like, damn, now I better show up and now I better, bring the heat. So a lot of love went into this. Hopefully it'll resonate and hopefully we can have a interactive session. I'm excited.
I'm back. When I made you the host, I couldn't unmute myself because I wasn't the host anymore. So
Oh, okay.
But we should be good now.
All right. Cool.
Yeah, so I think there was it jumped up at the end. I think there was 60 registrations. So I'm sure some people
Nice.
it won't be able to make it, but we'll let, I guess, some people still roll in here.
Awesome. Yeah, excited. I'm curious to get a glimpse into where everybody is. So, Art, I know are you in Philadelphia?
Just the other side of the state, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
Pittsburgh. Oh, wow. Oh, I love Pittsburgh. I've been to Pittsburgh a couple of times, to Carnegie Mellon University, and actually, I meant to go back to check out the Fred Rogers Center. I heard there's a memorial or something for him, right?
Yeah, I haven't been to it, but I believe that there is.
Yeah.
It's on my list of things to do this year. Has been, trying. So not been able to do a lot of things that I want to do.
Yeah.
I'm gonna unmute Paul here too. Paul's with NoCodeDevs with me. I'll let him say hi while people are rolling in.
Awesome. Welcome, Paul. And folks, chime in where you're joining from in chat. I'm looking at it right now. I'm in Atlanta, Georgia. Paul, where are you calling from?
I'm based in Sheffield in the UK, so like North England.
Oh, wow,
It's
nice.
So it's quite late in the afternoon for us. It's like nearly 7 o'clock.
Right.
It's like 7 o'clock in the afternoon on
Awesome.
a Saturday.
Thanks for joining. Oh, Overland Park, Kansas. Nice. San Francisco. That's cool. We have a couple San Franciscos actually. So West Coast folks. Nigeria. Wow. Somebody said AT. Is that ATL, Ben, or ALT? Ben Alexander. Atlanta. Wow, nice. We should find a way to get together at some point, this year, if you're interested in grabbing coffee or something. Rico, Belgium. Wow, that's cool. Ranier from India. Nice. That must be really late in India.
Sunday already there.
Right. It's almost, yeah, that's right.
Yeah, I think this was a pretty good time. It allows, the West Coast to be awake, and people that are in Europe, it's not too late. So hopefully this was a good time for everyone.
Yeah. And also, I think Saturday night being, if it's like India or Singapore, I think you can, hypothetically sleep in on Sundays if it, even if it's late, unless you have a newborn like me, and he will wake you up at 7 a.m. no, regardless, or 6 a.m. sometimes. All right, a couple of folks from India joining. That's cool. So we should get started at maybe the 3-minute mark, because since we planned this for like 45 minutes, and I actually I added a lot of content that I think would resonate and like would be useful, and I actually haven't time tested it, so this is like my prelims to do this workshop over and over again. But so this is my MVP, so excuse me if there's like too much data or too little content or examples. So I'm curious to hear your feedback at the end of it. But yeah.
Yeah, and I'll say, just for everyone listening, I put it in the notes, but this is being recorded, and maybe later today or by tomorrow for sure, I'll email it out to the attendee list in case you just want to go back and see any part of this call. It's being recorded. So
Awesome. We're about 19 people. Cool. Looks like we're going to have a cozy gathering. While we wait on a minute or two for the rest of the folks to join, can everybody chime in in the chat if you've ever built in public, or if you've had an experience? Would you say, in terms of 0 to 100%, how much do you know about the topic building in public? And feel free to, like, if you're a 5%, that's fine. Just feel free to write, so I get an understanding of where everybody else is. Nice, Simran. That's cool. A couple zeros. That's not bad. Good. We all start at 0. Hamshi 60, 80s. Daniel, good. 8. 55%. That's very specific, Samantha. Zoe, never. 20%. Paul, that's why I teamed up with Art. Art's pretty good. Completely new, 0. Ben's keeping it real, 1%. Rico, 30%. Okay, reading all and actually doing it. Yeah, that's good. That's a fair. I mean, I think gives me a little bit of insight into where you are in the spectrum. I think I'm at myself maybe at 60% in terms of execution success, or in terms of the output, but definitely in terms of obsession and thinking about this all the time, or experimenting with this all the time, I think I'm definitely over 100% because I'm always obsessed about this topic, and definitely close to my heart. So, all right, I think we're just past the 5-minute mark at my end. So, want to make sure that we get into the meat of this and start adding value, and we'll make this an interactive workshop. So, Art, you want to kick us off, or you want me to go dive in?
Yeah, I won't say much here. I'll let you dive in, but I want to thank everyone who's participating in this right now. This is great. Thank you, KP, for being here. KP, I'll let you do a little bit of a self-introduction, but KP is definitely the Build Public guy. He's with Be on Deck, and really appreciate him doing this with NoCodeDevs. And if you're not following KP on Twitter, follow him. If you're not following NoCodeDevs on Twitter, follow us. And I hope you get a lot of value out of this. So thank you, KP.
Of course. Thanks for having me here. And I've been talking about this topic in bits and pieces, and actually I've always wanted to summarize and distill like a lot of my thoughts with examples and sort of do's and don'ts into a actionable workshop. And I'm using this and all of you as my alpha audience to sort of test the material. So think of this as Kevin Hart trying to run bad jokes in front of small groups. So don't throw your drinks at me. You can't. Luckily, this is virtual. But a lot of this might bomb, and I'm gonna be okay with it. I hope that you're okay too. But at the end of this, I hope that you'll walk away with 1 or 2 actionable pieces of tips or advice that you can implement in your own building public journey. And a lot of you are devs, a lot of you are builders and no coders. That's why you're part of NoCodeDevs. So this might apply very directly to what you do, especially if you're a founder, you're a creator. But I'll try to be a little bit broad and not necessarily just about no code, but I think hopefully I'll drive this concept home in this, in the period that we have together. So please chime in your questions to the end. I love taking in questions, any kind of questions, fine. And let's kick this off. All right. So build in public, and if you saw my previous slide, I called it a superpower, and I truly mean it. And I think it's one of those things that people sort of semi know it, or they're curious about it. They know a little bit here and there. They've heard the phrase, but they haven't seen the breadth and the depth of the topic, or the power it has, especially in 2021, given how interconnected we all are, given how so much of our work is dependent on being connected, being on the internet. So with that said, here's the agenda. I have 4 sections. The intro part, what is building public and why should you care? How to do it. That's the part that I have, a bunch of screenshots and examples, and I'm going to discuss some common myths and mistakes, and we can do Q&A. All right. Let's keep it moving. Okay. So first question, who am I, right? For many of you actually follow me on Twitter, or you know me from a podcast or so. But for those who don't know me, I am Karthik Puvara. I go by KP on the internet. And I'm currently, as Art has introduced, I'm currently the program director of On Deck's No Code Fellowship. We have quite a few fellowships at On Deck, but I am running the No Code one. I'm a big believer in no code, very bullish about the space, and I think it's going to be a paradigm shift. But that's about the ODNC, which is the No Code Fellowship. Beyond that, I'm also a podcaster. I have a newsletter called Build in Public. Both of those entities live at the hub called buildingpublic.xyz. So if you are interested about this content and interviews, and about pros and cons and like all that stuff, it's all up there, buildingpublic.xyz. I also advise startups. That's something I started last year on the topic of growth, and building in public, how they can build communities. And recently, this 2021, I actually started becoming an angel investor, and I wrote my first check. And that's really one of those things I want to touch on today, the way it came to be as well. So, but that's all now. What was I doing before? I was a no-code builder, as you may have heard me mention. I built and shipped about 11 no-code projects. I actually lost count of how many tiny things I built, but let's say the major ones are those, and I did all of them in public. And it was very accidental. I didn't think so intentionally to build in public, but I lived in Atlanta, and at the time, I didn't have a lot of connections in the startup space and in the no-code space. So my way to interact with other ambitious, interesting people was to show my work, and that's how Build in Public began for me. And some of my many of my projects failed, some of them succeeded, one got acquired, but the way I saw the whole journey was just to keep taking more shots on the goal. And I'm a big believer in iteration and incremental success and not exponential success. So that's about me, and I work at On Deck, like I said. But what the hell is On Deck? For those of you who haven't heard about On Deck, we are, metaphorically, the new Stanford for the internet generation. It's a modern educational startup with about 20 fellowships now, ranging from founder fellowships to no-code founder fellowships to writers to podcasters to basically, healthcare, climate change, all kinds of sectors and positions like designers and product managers, and skills like no code and being a founder and angel investing, things that you can't teach or you can't learn from at a traditional university. Is this sort of on Deck's edge? We recently raised a 20 million Series A from top investors, who's who in Silicon Valley. As you can see, Keith Boy and Chamath and pretty much all the top guns. Eric Thornburg's the chairman, David Booth's the CEO, but that's about On Deck. That said, I really want to set the stage with this. So this is what sort of gave me the spotlight or the limelight, I'd say, of my career, which is building in public. And so I listed out a few big wins that I've had. Even going from someone who was literally nobody in the startup space. I had no connections. I was working at a corporate company called Delta Airlines, in a very different, comfy, cushion, safe job, with zero connections in Silicon Valley. Going from there to landing a high growth startup job like where I'm doing now was definitely possible because of Building Public. Starting a podcast and landing guests like Gary Vee is again another one big win. Building an audience, going from 300 followers on Twitter to now more than 20,000, both Twitter and newsletters, and building this incredible network, which I think my favorite part about this whole journey was the kind of ambitious and interesting peers that I've been able to place myself surround myself with, has been like the most satisfying part about this journey, which in one way led to my first angel check as well. So it definitely changed my life. I just wanted to show some of the highlights there. So let's get to the basics. Like, you may be wondering, what is building in public? Like, how would KP define building in public is? So I'd say, if I have to summarize it, it is basically the practice, and so that's very important. Because it's the practice. It's not, you're not going to get it right the first time. Just like basketball, just like any other skill, public speaking, you have to practice a lot. The practice of creating content and sharing stories in order to attract like-minded people and nurture those relationships. So the creating content part and sharing stories part is the means to an end. The end is attracting like-minded people, surrounding yourself with the right kind of people that will take you to the next level, and nurturing these relationships. Because with the internet, people are closer to you than you think. You're no longer limited by your zip codes, your community, like the local coffee shops or technology hubs. Today, like, the barriers are almost gone. I mean, they're there, but they're almost gone, especially on the internet. So to me, that is building in public, using content in that way. And if I have to give you a metaphor visually, I would say, using your content as light. Your content is your light, and become a lighthouse to attract other like-minded people on the internet. So that's one of the counterintuitive things that I've learned. When I first started on Twitter, I only had 300 followers, and most of them were like my friends or people that I just knew. I didn't realize how many people were interested in the stuff that I was doing or in the kind of person that I am. So I had such insecurity in the beginning that if I shared something about a certain topic, I don't think that's resonating or that would be relevant. So I kept sharing random high level crap that's not about me. It's not authentic. It's just, like rephrasing headlines and sharing as my own sort of takes on them. That's the absolute wrong approach, because you're underestimating the long tail of the internet. It's so powerful. Any niche you pick, let's say you're a sneakerhead, you might think that, yeah, I'm a weird sneakerhead. Maybe like 20 people on the internet care about this, or in your city might care about this, which is probably true. In your circle, maybe 5 people care about it. But on the internet, that 5% of the 100 is millions. So the same thing with no code. Even if it's like, you may think that, yeah, who cares about no code? If I'm a PM, I turn into a no coder. That niche is so tiny. No, there's actually millions of people who are going through the same path. And so if you become the lighthouse, which is, if you create content and talk about that niche over and over again in a wholesome way, you will attract other people who believe in what you believe. So another thing that of course, this was the main thing that I did not know early on. And I think I was so late to the game. 2018 was when I started, but it was quickly proven to me that it was still early. And there's a long way to go for all of us. So that's my TLDR on that. Why should you care? So with building public, to sort of list down some of these obvious to me now, but like some of these probably new benefits that you may have never seen, like attracting investors and key hires. Like I've had examples where I built a project called Kappa last year, and I had investors DM me, or angel investors DM me asking to write a check. And I was like, I don't even have an LLC at the time. It was not even a startup idea. It was just a project. But because I kept creating content and I kept writing, stuff, people assumed that I was a founder, which is not true at the time, and they just wanted to be part of something like that. And that has never happened to me. Let me tell you, like I had 7 years of me begging and running around investors in Atlanta or going to tech hubs, technology centers, and trying to like create a pitch deck and all that. But the tables have turned. Today, if you have a great idea and if you can create a community, and if you can sort of signal and exhibit this confidence that you're in the market for the long run, the tables have turned. Investors want to invest in you. They want to come to you. And the same thing with hires too. Like your CTO, or your marketing person. Like today, they want to see your work, and if they're impressed, they'll come to you. So it's a great hack. You don't have to go through LinkedIn and like go through listings and like all that. You can just like continue to share your work and share your story, and then naturally you'll attract high top talent. Same thing with being a founder and building a buzzing community. A lot of the people assume that they have to wait until they have an amazing idea like Product Hunt or Uber, Etsy, whatever, and then they'll build the community. I think it's completely broken. I had the same notion when I first began, that I thought I had to wait until I had a great idea, but that's actually the opposite. You should build community from day one. And even if like in the worst case, you may not be able to build something that's relevant to the community, but they will tell their friends. Do not underestimate the power of word of mouth. A lot of on deck no code fellowship applicants that I have now, they're not even people who want to join it, but they tell their friends and they come and join. Even if they're not they're not really the target audience in that case. So I think that is another big thing is make sure that you always build a community, because it's one of those things that will carry with you for the long run. Stay top of mind for customers. My favorite quote is, by default, if you're a startup, if you wake up, by default, your state is that the startup is dead by default. You have to do anything and everything in your ability every day to make it come alive every day. And it doesn't matter if you raised a pre-seed or raised a seed, you have to do something every day to stay on top of mind for customers, because today customers are bombarded with hundreds of solutions, hundreds of tools, and they're all competing, they're all doing the same thing. So it's important to stay on top. And my other part about sales is sales has transformed so much. Nobody likes to be sold, and you can see this by yourself. Like, you hate to be pitched and sold a product or a service. So the modern sales is actually consultative. It's offering value, zero ROI, like no ROI. Just offer value, be present, gain credibility, and people will want to buy from you anyway. So build that trust and build social proof, and so that can come from building in public because you're doing it daily, day after day. And the my last part, my favorite part, is actually the fact that you can. This is almost like writing an autobiography on the fly, right? Like there were so many stories that come out after the fact about great founders and great entrepreneurs and great investors. But what if we could see how they were thinking, the thought process, during the fact? And I think that's a very magnetic and a very attractive feature to me about building in public. So again, some benefits I want to highlight. How to do it right. So I got a bunch of examples here. There's so many times where people like rush to building in public and assume that there's only one way to do it, and they just keep repeating the same way. But I feel there's a plethora of options. Like there's a buffet. You can do many things in many ways, but the most important thing is to do it authentically with your own sort of judgment of what feels right to you. Don't You can copy someone's formatting or style, like Twitter thread styles or whatever, but don't copy their voice. And so some of the examples I want to show here are basically some of my great attempts and some of my dumb attempts. But they all are true to my voice, and I think that's one of the biggest takeaways for me. First of all, how to do it right. I think it goes without saying that Twitter is just Slack for the entire internet, at least in tech Twitter, at least if you're part of the tech community. And that was one of those things that I, of course, laughed at, when I first heard about Twitter. And I always thought like it was such a joke. Like people are like, why are they addicted to Twitter? Like especially tech Twitter. I was like, what? They're all flexing on each other. They're all bragging. It is true. Twitter has two sides to it. One side, Eric Thunberg calls it, Twitter has two sides. One, it's a civil war with outrage porn, and like everybody, anything you touch, it's like walking on eggshells. Like people are like slamming, slam dunking on each other, and it's just like a war, like civil war. But there was also another side of Twitter, which is like a quiet coffee shop, where you can pour coffee and sit next to an ambitious creator, maker, founder, writer, and ask about their work. And they're so damn pleased to talk about their work because, they love talking about their work. So you can learn so much, you can, and if you didn't like that person, let's say, okay, your first experience was bad, don't go back to that person. There's 15 other people willing to teach you about the same topic. If you want to learn about investing, there's 20,000 people happy to teach you about investing right now. So, but using it wisely and using it from a place of curiosity and relationships versus the civil war, I think is the most important distinction. Now, with that said, there's also other platforms and other distribution hubs that are where you can build in public. YouTube is like growing really well. I think they're calling it the smart YouTube, where there's like a lot of interesting takedowns, breakdowns on complex topics, using simple language. Gary Tan has a really popular YouTube channel, which I love. And, David Perel has one. So, YouTube's taken off. Definitely another platform that I want to be invested in. I haven't gone fully into it. I'm just like dabbling with it. But I highly recommend. Do what feels natural to you, right? There's also podcasts, which is why I got into podcasts. Indie Hackers is a great community. I'm sure some of you know this. Product Tons is a great community. You can build in public in any of these places, including TikTok and Racket. I just put LinkedIn, but maybe not, because LinkedIn's audience somehow feel like the opposite of vulnerability and authenticity. I think it's like flex in public. They're always bragging in public instead of or cringe in public, I guess. It's just for some reason that audience just doesn't jive with me, and I feel like the last 4 years of my journey, I spent 0 minutes on LinkedIn, including the day I had to get my job on deck. I didn't care about having any content on LinkedIn. So that's my take, but it's your experience may vary. So here's some real life examples of building public posts. So there's some categories that I threw there. I'm gonna walk you through each. Announcements, right? People love, so when they're going through an infinite feed, like there's content, 6 seconds, 2 seconds, like they have zero attention. I mean, like maybe the goldfish attention span. So they're scrolling really quickly. But if you have something that is interesting, don't just simply write about it. Include the word announcement or alert, because that is sort of a subconscious cue for them to stop scrolling and look and read the whole thing. There are so many times that I've written the same content without the word announcement and people like glossed over it. And I can't blame them because I'm like that too. So they work really well, but don't abuse them. Don't abuse them. Like you don't have an announcement every day, but definitely works. In fact, to a point where I even announced, our baby on Twitter, and it worked really well, and I think that's another thing too, is that be authentic, and I love being a dad. I love being a maker and a founder. So it's part of my personality I want to bring out. I'm not doing it just because, for followers or likes. Followers are a very poor proxy for impact. Real impact happens in DMs, in emails, and people like, thanking you in person. So don't worry about followers. I think they'll come. I've been shocked at how the algorithm works, and over time they'll just come. So that's one thing. Do announcements properly. The other thing is include screenshots. A lot of the times Twitter actually helps you, sort of adds more reach to your content if it has an embeddable image. That's another open secret a lot of people don't know. They usually drop links to an external URL, which is fine. Sometimes you have to, but Twitter prefers to keep people, users within the app, which makes sense, right? If that's how anybody would design it. So they actually help you get more reach if you have screenshots, and also it helps your audience to understand what you're going through, and it also opens up the vulnerability gate, as I was talking about, right? Like you're not trying to wait until you become perfect or the product becomes perfect. You're showing the progress daily, and and the people who will judge you regardless. The ones who care about what you're building will join you from day one. So screenshots, definitely. Another important thing that I like to do, and I think I haven't done as much lately, but lessons and tips is a great category of content. Like all of us have some micro lessons we're learning every week. It doesn't have to be like, here's the 7 tips I learned from meeting Gary Vee, right? That's once in a lifetime moment. But I'm saying like things like, hey, here's a microsite that I built this weekend, and here's like how the breakdown is, sort of what domain provider you used, what landing page builder you used, like basically anything that may add 1% value to someone who may not be in your shoes and may want to create the same thing, to me is worth tweeting about or writing about. Same thing with Kappa, like this project I was talking about. I would routinely post lessons, and even though they were like micro lessons, they were not like mega massive lessons, but I would get a lot of encouragement and a lot of responses from people because they resonated with it. Another category is shoot your shots, which is basically taking risk in public. This is another thing. This is actually the hardest part, and I did this like way late in the game, because otherwise you look like an idiot. And even now, I think I look like an idiot sometimes. But part of putting yourself out there is accepting that you might fail sometimes, and there's no way to fake that. There's no way to practice that, simulate that, unless you actually do the thing with your skin in the game. So with Gary Vee's podcast interview, I actually shot my shot. If you see my tweet on the left, that's how I got Gary Vee. But if you notice, the subject line or the first line itself signals to him that I'm ready to take a no, which means no risk for him. He can just simply say no, or he can not act on it and just not look at it. But because I think my take is, because the fact that I actually had that vulnerability and sort of like no expectations thing on the top, I think he read the rest and he resonated with the part of the story that we both have in common, like immigrant story and the NFTs thing we were talking about, and document don't create, which is kind of like build in public. He resonated, and he said yes, and I recorded a podcast. It was life changing, and he had acknowledged that that the way I phrased the tweet, he said, like, was very, very compelling, and I was like, amazing, So, but at the same time, the second tweet I'm showing you is the one that did not work. I did this, I think, like a day ago. And Kunal Shah is actually a popular entrepreneur in India, and somebody I used to follow for I still follow a long time. He didn't say yes. I think that just went down down the gutter. But that's how it is. It sometimes you just shoot your shot, doesn't work, you move on. I don't think anybody out there is busy judging, all of our tweets. If they are, then sad for them. And this is the third one on the right, is actually the tweet thread that I wrote when I announced that I'm going to work at a startup. And I call that the bat signal tweet thread, because that's the one that landed me eventually at On Deck. But I got 13 job interviews by that tweet, and 3 final offers after the interviews, and one of them being On Deck. So sometimes you just have to shoot your shot. Write threads. The guy on the left, Blake Amal, I don't know if you follow him, but you should. He's a beast in writing threads. I think he's just amazing, and he shares all of his playbooks openly. And I learned so much by watching him execute. And so definitely follow him. Write threads like Blake if you can. Some of the threads that I wrote on the right, the GIF is not loading properly, but these were written last year. Actually, this was written this year. Some of them were written last year, but threads always work, So, but they do take time, and they do take a certain type of formatting. So, definitely, invest in it, and make the most of it. My other hack is, it's actually very, very simple, and in fact, it's actually 10x easier than doing a thread. Ask curious questions. And this is 2018 when I had, like, I think 300 followers. Naval Ravikant, who I follow, and I'm sure you've heard about him, had a thread, actually had a thread or had a tweet, and I would genuinely just show up and ask questions. Like, as you can see there, he would reply, and because these questions are curious questions and not like yes men questions, or not like critical, like very cynical, like takes and trying to dunk at him, he would answer, and sometimes he wouldn't, like, it doesn't matter. But that's how actually I built in the early days a lot of my early followers, by asking thoughtful questions. And even now, recently, once in a while, I pose an open question, something that's top of mind for me. I just pose an open question, and I even like put a caveat saying this might be a bad idea, and people like resonate with that shit so much. And so they're always like, those are the threads, those are the tweets that go viral routinely, much more than anything that I talk about, like myself or my personal updates. All right, so I think with that said, I think I've given enough fodder for you so far to get started. I want to touch on a couple big mistakes and myths people have, and we'll do Q&A because I know we only have a few minutes here. So a lot of people assume building public is actually hard. I refute, and I think it's actually easy, but all of these other characteristics that are the ingredients of building in public, are hard. I'm sorry. Like, being consistent is hard. If you're doing it for the wrong reasons, you're not going to be consistent. So learning to tell stories are hard. I have practiced so much writing the right headline. Like, how do I make sure that it comes off in a positive way? Like, how do I, put this in a compelling way? So that part is hard. It takes a lot of iteration. And fears of judgment. I feel like a lot of the stuff that I do can be easily judged, by people. But constantly facing it, owning it, and saying that, hey, sometimes you just gotta shoot your shot and move on. I think that part is hard, but now, eventually it gets easier. So with that said, I want to leave with this caveat: what building public is not. It is definitely not oversharing trivial updates. One of the things that I notice people make a common mistake is that they overshare random trivial shit. Like, today I had this coffee at Starbucks and I had a banana, and I'm like, but how does that, like, it's not useful to anybody, right? and they come back to me or DMs and say, KP, here's my 700 tweets I made in the last 7 days, and I don't have any new followers or any new signups or anything. And I'm like, and if you audit the tweets, you're like, God, why is this guy oversharing this shit, right? And there's a funny term that we use, my wife and I, it's called TMUD, too much unnecessary detail. So don't do that. Like, and don't burden your audience with telling stories and telling stuff that doesn't matter, So look at it from your own perspective and say, like, is this really helpful? Like, if it is helpful, definitely, even the trivialist thing, smallest thing, share about it. But if it's not helpful, if it's some random, like, hey, I'm hanging out at in I don't know, some backyard of something, who cares? So be thoughtful about the updates you share. The other thing is dunking on others. That's very, very popular on Twitter. Like, again, I think it belongs to the part of Twitter we talked about earlier, which is a civil war Twitter. It's one of the most off-putting things you can do as building in public, right? Even when you see somebody slip and do something stupid, or maybe they had a gotcha, it gives nobody any joy to be the first person to tell them I told you so, because you instantly lose reputation and credibility. And unfortunately, even some of the biggest stars on Twitter do this, in tech Twitter or anywhere. But I feel sad for them, because it comes from a place of judgment, and it's such a heavy burden to carry. Why? Unless you are absolutely perfect and you're godlike, which I doubt, you should not be running around trying to throw stones at somebody else's stuff. The other thing is, people also use building in public as a way to brag and flex constantly. That's another off-putting thing. You'll notice that you won't have any resonance, or you'll have some fake resonance. Building in public is a mindset to teach and share what you know and help others and build a community. But if you're constantly bragging and making it about me, it's really hard to stay connected and engaged in your content. The fourth bullet point is obvious, but this is one of the questions I keep getting. KP, should we share sensitive data? I'm like, answer is no. Use common sense. Like, why would you share customer's email address or their SSN number or something that they said in a heated moment publicly and blast them, unless you want to get back at them, which is different. I'm talking about building public is not like airing your dirty laundry. I said this in one of my tweets, and that went viral, because people assume that, building public means I have to share everything, like the good, bad, and ugly. I'm like, yes, maybe the highs and lows, but you don't need to share the ugly parts publicly and with no, like, unless there's a lesson there. If I fucked up so many times and I made mistakes, and so I write about, like, here's the 5 things I learned, that's fine. Or if Blake does it, or if you do it, that's fine. But if there's no real lesson there and you're just like ranting, I think your audience will be turned off. The last one is rambling without intentionality. A lot of the times people try to copy other big thought leaders, and they just ramble. It can work, but I think the larger picture we're talking about is have some intentionality on why you're doing build in public, and make sure that majority of your content is that way. And there will always be some minority of content that is about living life. That's fine, but make sure that your majority is about intentionality. So to summarize, my lens to creating great content is as follows. I look at anything that I want to share, either threads or screenshots or tweets, and say, is this educating and teaching someone something interesting? And even if that is obvious to my peers, I still ship it, because what's obvious to me and my peers may not be obvious to the person 3 years ago. Like, even to the KP 3 years ago, there's so many things that are not obvious, including this presentation. If I knew all of this, I would have been like at 100K followers or audience. But I did not know that stuff. So when you share and educate, you're inspiring and impacting so many people who may have not gotten the chance to be in your shoes, and learn the lessons you've learned. So that's the lens I use. The other thing is inspiring and bringing hope. I try to see if there are parts of my life, parts of the stuff that I hear, parts of the stuff that I get to serve, like at ODNC and program director, there's some transformational stories that I get to hear, as from my fellows. So I try to share those stories, to me, because that is about celebrating them, and it inspires another person to get into no code. And the third thing is elevate and cheer on others' wins. Art does a great job of this, actually. In the worst case, if you don't have any new content, if you have writer's block, simply go on Twitter or anything, podcast, YouTube, whatever, and pick out other people's amazing content and just tell them this is awesome, because the greatest thing a creator can have is some sort of genuine feedback and appreciation, because so many times you just write stuff and you don't know. It's like you shot your shot into vacuum and you're like, I have no feedback. So cheering others and helping them and just celebrating them, I think is easy. Like Arvid Kahl does a great job of this on Twitter. The last one is entertain and actually be funny. This is a tricky one. I don't think I'm very funny or entertaining, so I try to walk a very thin line there. Being funny is very, very hard, and you know this from watching Netflix or watching any movies. Like, you have to genuinely be funny, in the sense that your jokes are basically about a context or a scenario, not really about mocking people or mocking different labeled people or a one minority or another. It's very tricky to actually be funny. So the best kind of humor to me is self-deprecating humor. Ryan Reynolds does a great job. So many of our favorite people actually does a great job of that, right? But I am personally, unless I know this joke is really gonna go well, I don't really try to joke too much, because I'm not naturally a funny person. My wife would argue, but I use baby pictures, or I use something else that is entertaining, and share some other personal glimpses. But that's my lens, and bottom line, win and help win. And Balaji, yes, recently said this in one of the podcasts, and it resonated with me deeply, is there are days where you feel like you're winning, you're crushing it. Your tweets are going viral, your signups are going up, your whatever you want to do, like, it's working. That's awesome, great, celebrate, cherish, enjoy that moment. But there are days where nothing seems to be working, and you're like, I don't know what I'm doing wrong. Like, this thread was valuable, I don't know why people are not resonating, or this Substack article was useful, I don't know why nobody signed up. In fact, 4 people unsubscribed. In those moments, turn around and help somebody else win. That's like how I turn my days around. There are days where I'm like, it's all shitty, like my content's bad, it's not working. And I turn around and I look at someone like Janelle, or someone like Art, or someone like Sharath, and say, if they're having a win, I celebrate the win, or I play a role in the win. And that's how I think another part of building public helps you, is that your brand or your leverage or your reputation grows because you're a helper. You're not very egotistic, you're just helping because you care. So that said, thank you so much for listening, and we can do some Q&A.
Yeah. Hey, thanks so much, KP. That was awesome. I am going, I'll start off with the first question, because I have one that I want to ask you, and then I'm going to allow people to unmute themselves. So if you want to ask a question, just unmute yourself and ask a question. If you can share video too, that'd be awesome, but no pressure at all. So my question, I'll start off, KP, is, I think for me, when I think of building in public, there's this guy from Banner Bear, which is an image generation service. His name is John.
Yeah.
And
John's awesome. Yeah.
He shares, my question's all about like sharing like MRR and revenue, because he does share that kind of stuff. In fact, he has like a whole page on his site where he shares MRR. And I think some people think like, oh, that's bragging. But I wanted to get your sort of take on, building in public and sort of sharing your, being open with your sort of revenue stats and your subscriber stats. I mean, he talks about his churn too in the bad, but
yeah.
What's your sort of take on that? And do you think you have to be careful with, not being too, braggadocious, so to speak?
Yeah. I mean, if you have a feeling internally deep down that this might come off as braggadocious, I think you should give it a thought and say, okay, maybe there's a reason why I'm feeling this way. Like, most of the stuff that you put out, as long as you're feeling guilt-free, like, think about the moments where you actually feel guilt-free about sharing a life story, right? Like, I shared the fact that I had Gary Vee on my podcast. The reason why I share that publicly and happily guilt-free is because I genuinely waited 10 years to get that moment, and I genuinely like cared about him, and I genuinely like loved every second of that. And so much about that story is like, a normal guy like me can do this. And here's how I did it. Here's the playbook. It's not so much that, oh, like, people like me have done these kind of awesome things, and so hence, you should follow me, right? So I think there's that subtle taste and subtle distinction, and it comes off very clearly, and people are not dumb. Like, my baseline assumption is the stuff that I put out, I assume all of my followers are intelligent and more intelligent than me, and more smarter than me, basically. So especially like, someone like my wife, I'm like, if she will read this and she thinks that I'm like bragging, that's gone. Like, I'm not going to put that out. But there are times where you actually want to share a story because it's inspirational or it changed your life, it touched your life, right? So MRR stuff, I think I'm actually pretty open to that. Like Paul Yakubian and Chris Liu from Copy.ai, they routinely share MRR. Sharath, one of my good friends, shares MRR. John does a great job. As long as you're sharing that, hey, this is possible, and also the curve doesn't look like a rocket ship as you may imagine, from TechCrunch, that everybody's like stuff is like a hockey stick. I think that's what they're trying to communicate, And so if the creator is communicating that, the founder, and if it comes across in a positive light that way, and trying to teach somebody else that, hey, you can be a SaaS founder too, I think I'm absolutely up for it. But it comes out from a place where you can read it and you can connect the dots in 4 or 5 tweets. Like, yeah, this feels a little off. Then you're like, people are smart, they will unfollow you, right? You can't, in today's world, you can't get around doing crap like that. You can't, do shit like that and get away. So.
Yeah, totally agree. Thank you. I think there's a couple questions in the chat. If I'll just let you take those.
Sure. Okay. So folks, if you want to come off mute and ask me one-on-one, feel free, but otherwise, I'll be happy to read them out and answer. So Ranier, I'm about to go answer your question. Who were the people whom you took inspiration from and sort of emulated when you began your building public journey? That's the first. Oh yeah. Oh, a lot of them actually. Ryan Hoover from Product Hunt. In fact, in 2013 or 14, he would share screenshots, mock-ups of Product Hunt, early pages and early days, and ask people feedback. And I thought that was revolutionary back in the day. Because no founder would this is normal now, but back in the day. And Cortland Allen would do the same from Indie Hackers. So those were inspirations. I had who else? So I mean, I think there were so many people like Peter Levels, if anybody knows him, Nomad List, levels.io, I think. Levels.io is the Twitter handle. He built 12 startups in 12 months, and he pretty much shared every step of the way. I thought that was inspirational. So yeah, I had quite a few inspirations. Even now, I have a lot that I learned from, like Blake Emal, someone that I'm, admiring and learning from. Morning Bruce, both the co-founders, they're good. I know them really well, and they're both amazing at what they do. That I admire. So Amanda, I just gave a shout out to Amanda on Twitter, founder of House of Weiss, a D2C brand. She does a good job too. So there's something to learn from anybody and everybody, So second part, any specific advice for completely tech ignorant people who aspire to build product or startup? That's a great no-code question, I think. So tech ignorance seems a little too harsh on yourself. I feel like you're probably referring to non-technical. And I was a non-technical person in 2018 myself, and I recently just, since 2018, picked up no-code and started building projects. So I think my advice would be, unless you have a great technical co-founder you respect and you love and you're aligned with, enter no-code space, join NoCodeDevs and take up these challenges that Art has, or join 100 Days of No Code or whatever, and build small projects and iterate and slowly use the iteration to get to the bigger projects. And I think one of the big mistakes I made, and I often see a lot of people make, is they pick up like the biggest idea they have because they want to sound smart or sound acceptable to their friends. That's bullshit. Don't care about being acceptable to your friends. Tell them, start building a very tiny Glide app. And if nobody else uses it, at least you will use it if you pick a project that actually you care about, a topic you care about. So yeah, start small and then iterate.
I think Rigo has his hand raised.
Yeah.
Rigo.
Don't mind me coming off mute. Yeah. Dude, you have a ton of energy. How the hell do you do it? Where do you get it from, man? What do you eat for breakfast? Like I turn on my the Twitter notifications for you, and it's all day long. How do you do it?
Thank you. You're being too kind, but I don't know, man. I think I've had, like I said, 7 years of suffering, of being on the sidelines in a way. And like I was 21, I already knew that I wanted to be a tech founder. I wanted to be in the middle of the thing. I wanted to be the man in the arena, the famous poem. But for 7, 8 years, I had so many limiting beliefs that I thought I had to first get some ground experience, or like some corporate experience, or that and this. And so I believed, basically I was so naive, and I believed everybody who told me what I should be doing. But that created a lot of pent up energy. And I think after 7 years, I finally picked up this book called Atomic Habits, which is my favorite book, and it changed my game. It's talked about identity, and I shared this in all my podcasts. It says when you shift your identity from I am someone who may be X, may be Y, to like very affirmatively saying I am X. I am, for example, I am a maker, I am a founder, I'm a builder. It has a very profound impact, and I think so. It liberated me. That I didn't need all this credentialing and all that crap. I just simply could become who I want to become, but slowly, each day accumulate votes and, evidence that I'm becoming that person. And so when I realized Twitter was this open field that someone like me could enter and like share my thoughts and slowly build community, I just wanted to go all in. And so that's what I think what you're referring to. I just went all in, because I'm like, this is the greatest time to be alive and create a community. And people like me, who I thought I had a big chip on the shoulder, I still have a big chip on the shoulder. I had so much to prove, and I was like, I'm gonna fucking do this. So I'm a little. I think I'm a little slowed down thanks to my son now, because he's it's been a big change having being a new dad. But definitely want to come back strong and continue to keep building community and content. So
thanks.
Thank you, Rico. Moving on to Jeremy. Jeremy, you want to ask a question?
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
So I have a similar background in terms of being an immigrant to the U.S., and I'm very familiar with the visa story. But one thing I've been thinking about is angel investing. And so you mentioned that early in your intro, and so I was wondering how you went about getting started in it. You mentioned being in Atlanta and not necessarily being exposed in that environment, versus New York, San Francisco, etc. So how do you go about finding deals, and do you have a process as you're starting out, or is it a little bit ad hoc to build your sort of expertise in that area? Thanks.
Yeah. No, a lovely question. We have a lot in common, along with the visa struggles. But my answer is it's quite, again, it's quite ironic what we assume, and sort of quite counterintuitive what we think is possible for us, and what is really possible. The first, I for the longest time I thought that I had to accumulate so much money, or I had to have disposable income, so much disposable income, or I had to have a fund's blessing, or I had to be in Silicon Valley, or I had to have all these connections to write my first check or be an angel investor. But the same thing, just like with no code, just like with being a content creator, if you decide, the universe will bring you opportunities. So in February this year, I decided, and I fired off a tweet saying, hey, I intend to become an angel investor, and here's what I'm interested in. It's like how I did with my job at OnDeck before joining OnDeck, and suddenly, like a month later, a Canadian entrepreneur, which is so funny because I'm in Atlanta and he's in Canada, he reached out to me and DM'd me and saying, KP, we're raising a pre-seed, and I remember your tweet from February. I was like, what the hell? Like, this guy remembered my tweet from February, and he goes, we would love to have you. We want to make allocation for you. And at the time, I freaked out because I was like, I actually don't have a lot of money. You may assume that I'm like the next Naval, but I'm not. Like, I have no money, man. And he goes, we don't care. You're overthinking this, KP. Like, We just want you to be on the cap table, even with the smallest check possible. So I wrote like the tiniest check imaginable to be on the cap table. And it was a Canadian company called Fluent, which is, fluent.co, like a web-based Chrome extension actually for language learning. And I realized, and I asked him like, why the hell would you want me? And he says, two things: distribution, because he understood that I'm playing the distribution game, which is, creating content, newsletters, Twitter, et cetera, et cetera. And the second thing is build in public. He said, we want you because you understand building in public, building in communities. And that's very important for our, for their journey. So my answer to you is like, if you decide to become one and just share, how you would add value or what you would like to do, the internet will find you, the right people to you, Jeremy. And they are closer to you than you think. I think that's my surprising discovery.
Awesome. Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
Cool. So I see a couple more hands. Paul, you want to go next?
Yeah, no worries, man. For me, when I first started with no code, it was like it was a side project. So I was working full-time job, working social care full-time job, and it was a side project. And I built this amazing. Well, I thought it was amazing personally, but I didn't concentrate on the building public bit. So what do you think your priority should be for no code founders working full-time? So this is a part-time project. What division should there be? Well, obviously building. So I did none of the building public, but I did all the building.
Right.
So when I launched, nothing happened.
Yeah, I mean, it's insufferable. I mean, it's again, it's one of those things, man. It's miserable to like work so hard and launch on Twitter or go on Product Hunt or Indie Hackers, and you get like 4 upvotes, right? And I think you have to go through that loop once or twice to fully understand why the hell building community and building an audience is so important. So my first ever Product Hunt experience was I launched, nobody cared. And I had to personally email a lot of people and then ask them to upvote. And it felt like I was begging for their attention, which was so humiliating, because I thought the idea was interesting. I thought that there were so many features that I built and nobody gave a shit. And then I realized that it's people you can't scheme people. You can't simply just like, shake them and say, pay attention to me. You have to earn trust. And this is the hardest part a developer or a or no coder. This is the hardest advice and hardest pill to swallow, because you think your ideas will stand alone and objectively will attract people, which it works if the world's attention is so easy to come to you. But because we're inundated with shit and we're all like busy with doing 15,000 things, and like everyone's got 15,000 things every day, it doesn't work like that, right? Most of the time, the way it works is people flock to other people that they respect in the niche, or other creators they admire, or who they trust, or an idea that is absolutely magnificent, like unbelievably original, which happens like so rare, right? Unless you're building the next, next Uber or something. So the hard reality that I had to come to terms with is that nobody will give a shit if I don't become an authority figure in my niche, or if I don't become not even authority figure, like if I don't build my own distribution hub, right? And so the other mistake I made is that I thought, okay, distribution hub meant that I had to copy David Perel, who has this writing audience, which was so hard to copy, because that's why it's called the moat, right? Because he did it in a certain way, and it's like cemented, in a certain way. You cannot. So even the same thing, you can't copy me because I've done these things in a certain way. So if you copy them, you're not going to get the same results. The best thing to do is look at their case studies and look at okay, that's what they're trying to tell us, that distribution is important. Having an audience is important. All right, I'm going to do it my way, and I'm going to do it using the thing that feels like play to me. To me, Twitter was play. For newsletters were fucking pain. Like the long form writing was so much pain. So I just used Twitter, and I used some of the podcasts, because podcast is fun for me. And I created content, iterated them, and over time built an audience. So I think the funny thing is, until the compound interest is the strangest thing, man. Until I think August last year, I still only had 3,000 followers. now I have close to 15K, and it blows my mind because it's like after a while, once you hit the initial hurdles, like it gets easier and easier. But the initial hurdles are so hard that I remember hustling so hard to get the first 1,000 followers. The first 100 subscribers email newsletter were the hardest. Now, actually, it's unfair now because now I see the people joining my email newsletter, and I'm like, there are 100 people join on one day, and I haven't done anything to promote it. So it's so unfair, but it's the game. So you better learn the game and play it that way. So, all right.
Cheers, man.
Moving on to another. Of course, thank you. We got a couple hands. Art, you want to pick your favorites?
Yeah, I think. Sorry if I'm butchering this name, but Akhil, I think you've had your hand up quite a bit.
Yeah. Hi, Karthik. Big fan of your work. So I recently started, being active on Twitter, and then, started to be consistently tweeting. But the thing is, I'm really bad at writing, and also I don't know, how do I find content to put up over there?
So I mean, I haven't read your stuff, so I can't really definitely agree if you're a bad writer or not. But most likely you're being too harsh on yourself. That's one thing that's very likely. A lot of us, when we begin, we're like, yeah, I'm so bad at this. I thought I was so bad at podcasting, and then I listened to some others, and I'm like, actually, you know what, I'm okay. So it's some of this is limiting beliefs, but to be honest, much more than are you good at it or not, the question I want to ask is, are you having fun doing it or not? It should feel like play, not like work. So this Q&A to me feels like play. So that means that in my mind, I'm making a mental note that I actually have to do more Q&A sessions because I enjoy this part. I'm not even like preparing any answers. It's just impromptu, right? But for some people, this might be nerve-wracking. They might be sweating. They might be afraid that you are going to ask a personal question or offensive question. I have no fucks to give, right? So I think that's an important thing. Whatever you feel like you're enjoying or it feels like play to you, you should overdo it. Maximize the hell out of your time to do that activity. For David Perel, writing it is. And I asked him recently, and a while ago, and he said the same thing. He's like, he enjoys collecting notes, writing long form essays, packing my car, make same thing. For me, that's like torture. So, I don't compare myself with them in that respect because I'm like, I don't want to, get into something that I'm not enjoying. But pick one of these 15 things we shared today, like, rackets or YouTube or creating videos, editing videos. This is the greatest time to be a content creator. I'm telling you this. And if you're like someone who's relatively young and who have a little free time, you should invest in yourself and on the internet, and some ideas are basically, I can help you on DMs so that we can have other questions too. But there's so many things you can do, Akhil. But make sure that you pick the one that you actually fully enjoy.
Yeah, thank you.
Ramshri, you want to go next?
Yeah. Thanks, KP, for doing this. I'm also new to building public movement. I did something similar before even knowing this term, but nevertheless, my question is, does building public for programmers mean open sourcing anything like code or library? Because I think ever since I heard the term, I think that's one question that remained with me. If you're coming from programming background, do you need to open source some code or library to build in public?
I mean, it wouldn't. I mean, as long as it doesn't hurt sort of your core bottom line of the business, I wouldn't mind building a couple tools and giving them out for free. Like Banner Bear, if you think about John, like he does a lot of these one-off tools that he builds, and they're just marketing vehicles. Same thing with like, if you go to Softer.io, which is a no-code platform, at the very bottom, the footer, they have a couple tools like a blob generator. It's just free. It's not even part of the product. They just give it away for free. So if you're a programmer and if you have a couple side projects that are open source or could be open sourced, just do it. Give value. I think the thing you have to realize is building public is so much about it is actually giving value first with no expectations, and trusting that people will remember, what you have done for them, and that they do. The right ones do. I'm not talking the wrong ones. The right ones will remember, and they'll follow you or come back to what you want them to do. So that would be my take.
Thank you.
Cool. Vishwesh.
Hey, hi, KP. So I have a question that when you are building in public or when you are building your own profile, a social profile for that matter, are you careful what you tweet about? In a sense, what I'm trying to ask is, say, for example, if I want to build myself as a no-code builder, or say as an angel investor, for example, do you stop tweeting about other things? Like, say, for example, I tweet a lot about leadership lessons, which I have learned over the years, but then in between, I also tweet poetry and some other stuff, which is not related to that topic. So how do you actually make sure that you're not pushing audience away?
Yeah, it's hard. I mean, I used to, one of my favorite struggles that I had, I mean, I even have favorite struggles, which means I have had several struggles, is the struggle of being pigeonholed into one particular niche or one particular area of interest. And I always hated that in the early days. When I had 300 followers, here's the shit that I cared about. Oh, how can I, someone like me who's multidimensional, I have so many interests, multi-passionate, so many thoughts. How can I pigeon myself into a tiny niche and talk about only one niche and not about other topics? So I'm not going to call myself anything, or I'm not going to, add content in a particular niche consistently. I'm just going to be open-minded, broad. You know how many followers I had? 300. Nobody gave a shit. And then I slowly over time realized that, that's not how it works. Like you can't say that I'm everything for everybody, and expect people to follow you or, follow your story. You have to be something for someone, right? Like nobody is everything for everyone. So I over time slowly realized that, okay, the Venn diagram of stuff that I love talking about, stuff that I have an authoritative opinion on, or something that I've done, like public stuff that I've done, and I can speak, constructively and strongly about. That's the other circle. And the third thing is stuff that people are finding valuable from my Twitter. If for the third part, you can use Twitter Analytics or a tool called ilo.so. And I realized a lot of the stuff that people were finding useful in terms of analytics was building public content or like screenshots or announcements. And I was like, oh, so nobody really cares about the Thai restaurant that I had, or Thai meal that I had in Atlanta, or this amazing like experience I had like going to Michigan. Nobody cared about them. I'm like, oh, okay. So over time, I made sure that I created more content, which is basically I took more shots in that bucket and became more and more valuable to that niche, so that they called me the Building Public guy repeatedly in so many of my mentions, DMs, and Twitter. And I've embraced it, because on the internet, the asset that is so scarce is attention. And the way to capture attention is to be consistent about a certain topic for a long time. So I maximized my output on the topic of building in public, because I realized that it's something that people are feeling valuable, and also something that I love talking about anyway. And also it's something that I'm good at, because I'm showing some proof of work. Now there's still a lot of my life that I tweet about, but it pales in comparison to this. So 80% of my content is building public. 20% is like me, my wife, or my kid, or being a father, like, the diapers that I have to change, or like learning about new stuff. But and in many ways, people actually will find it endearing that you have another side. That, hey, this person also is sharing about the other things too. That's cool. But they come to you and they follow you for the main reason, which is the value.
Cool.
Awesome. Okay, so looks like we are at the end of the questions, unless I'm missing anything.
AJ,
yeah, that's it.
AJ, do you have a question?
Oh,
do you have time for one more?
Sorry.
Yes, actually, I do.
AJ, yes. Hello.
Hello, KP. I appreciate all your work. It really has helped me out. So my question for you is formatting. I made the attempt with building public, and I reached that point where, as you explained earlier, in regards to the team mud, I've gotten to that point, and I felt like
We've all been there. Don't worry.
right. So I guess where I'm getting at is, while I'm formatting this building public, I've been utilizing the Twitter thread. I would get some engagement by utilizing hashtags. Okay, so should I be using the hashtag every single post, or
I use
what are some
hashtags
tips
the
on
way,
that?
and a great question. I use hashtags the way I used the announcement phrase, right? I use it sparingly, and I use it when I definitely need people's like attention, or I need this to go into that hashtag cloud, right? But if you do it over and over again, they're gonna zone you out, and you're gonna sound spammy or look spammy, right? But it definitely works. Like I occasionally, every once in a while, when I know that I want, for example, I had something around building public recently. I can't remember which one it is. I think it was like something about wanting. I was looking for content, or like, just ship it challenge. I think it was about basically what have you shipped in the last month or so, and I was trying to crowdsource the answers to put it in my newsletter and celebrate some of the special projects or the ones that I loved. So in that sense, I needed that to go widely. So I used the hashtag. So something like that will warrant a hashtag. But I like I said, use it just like the announcement phrase. Use it sparingly, because otherwise, people are going to zone you out. And unfortunately, on Twitter as opposed to LinkedIn, hashtags don't work as effectively. They do, but they're not as effective as in LinkedIn's like next level with hashtags. Twitter doesn't really value hashtags as much.
Appreciate that.
Cool. Hey, looks like Daniel from Australia, like 4 a.m. joined us. Hey, Daniel, do you have a question? It's okay if you don't. All right, folks, this was fun. I had a great time. Thanks for your thoughtful questions. And I'm glad we're recording this, because I think some of this stuff is useful to me as well, to go back and use it as part of some of the FAQs that I get. So thanks for having me here, Art. And I wish you all the best building in public, and keep in touch. All right. So this is my Twitter handle. If you're interested about this content, about this topic, feel free to follow me. All right. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks so much, KP. Thanks, everyone. See ya.